Now, you know you cannot come to a Milken event without a quiz. You know, you would be uncomfortable from that standpoint. So at your desk was testing your alternative energy IQ. And so we're operating on the honor system here. The first question is, what country produces the most electricity in absolute terms from renewable sources? Iceland, Norway, US, China. How many think it's Iceland? Raise your hand. Okay, just Frank Baxter and Sarah Sandler. Okay. All right, how many think it's Norway? Lynda Resnick leads that team, and Bob Barth, okay. A few other votes. How many think it's the United States? Scott, you've got quite a following here. And how many think it's China? A small sampling. Okay, so Scott, what do you think the answer is that's the correct answer there?
Well, Mike, I think it's the United States, just because of all the investment we've made in renewable energy over the last decade or so.
It is, but if you've ever seen the 405, you always wonder what year they're going to get it done. That's why it's China. Okay, what they can build in a year takes us 3 or 4 years. So it's China. What country gets the largest percentage of its electricity from renewable sources? This is now largest percentage. Iceland, Norway, Paraguay, if you've ever seen Iguazu Falls, or the United States. How many think it's Iceland? You got quite a following. Are you going to vote for Iceland on every question?
Every time.
Eventually you'll get it right. Okay. How many think it's Norway?
I would have thought it was Norway.
You? Paraguay? Even when I told you about Iguazu Falls? And how many think it's the United States? The correct answer, 1 in the United States. Now, that would be pretty hard to do for the United States. But the correct answer to that one is, led by Frank Baxter, Iceland. Okay. They get actually almost a very large percent, almost 100% of their energy from geothermal in Iceland. Okay, 3. Last year, what was the biggest source of new generating capacity in the United States? So we're only talking now about 2012. What was the biggest change in additional capacity in the U.S.? Natural gas, wind, nuclear, or solar? How many think it's natural gas? How many think it's wind? Not too many. Okay. How many think it's nuclear? Got a lot of those nuclear plants opening up here. And how many think it's solar? A few. The correct answer is solar. No, the correct answer to that one is wind.
Wow, really?
Okay. Wind power was the largest source of new capacity for the first time in the United States. First time in the United States. Lastly, wind farms have roughly the same generating capacity on paper as the entire power sector in which countries? Luxembourg. Does anyone want to vote for Luxembourg? Okay. You have to go a long way to top Luxembourg's power. Spain, France, Australia. Correct answer by the group, very good, is Australia. And also we gave you this excellent report that you have from the Wall Street Journal earlier this year on the 6 myths of renewable energy. And the answer on wind was surprising, but when you read that, you'll see that U.S. wind farms, in global terms, produce the equivalent of 47% of all the electricity in Mexico on a comparable basis, 26% of France, 62% of Australia, 64% of Turkey. And so it runs through these areas. But our panel today is not just going to focus on this area, though we do have one of our panelists who is Lyndon, who is an expert to talk particularly about solar here today. And so you've had a chance to read the background of our panelists. And first question I'm going to start with, Scott, is with you. This morning's LA Times reported that California finances are improving faster than expected, and that higher than expected projected revenues could result in this surplus we saw. And of course, we can project to the future that by 2018 we could have a $10 billion surplus. What do you make of the slide?
Well, first off, I think you're cheating by giving a quiz off of the morning paper, which I haven't had a chance to read. But Mike, I think this is what the governor was pointing to, which is the belief that the current situation will go on into perpetuity. When 5 years ago, when we were together and we were at the height of the financial crisis, people were projecting awful returns on pension funds into perpetuity and deficits as far as the eye could see. I think a healthy dose of mean reversion, I'll call it, is needed here, which is to start to understand that surpluses probably for the state will continue for the next couple of years as capital gains are harvested. But they're longer term, there is a structural issue around the tax base, and I think the governor's idea of a rainy day fund is one that's interesting, but probably addressing the structural issue about the volatility around our tax base with the capital gains component to eliminate some of the volatility would be useful to help the legislative process along to come up with a more realistic approach to budgeting for the next couple of decades.
Scott, let's talk about the municipal market for a moment. Obviously, California is a major player in the municipal market. Recent bankruptcies of cities around the country. California's also taken the lead in that with San Bernardino and Stockton and others. How do you see this affecting the municipal market?
Well, Mike, it's already had a pretty severe impact. Pricing on municipal debt is very unattractive relative historically to other fixed income instruments. You can buy single A muni bonds at yields which are higher than below investment grade securities. And as of course, if you know, the rating doesn't always tell the whole story. But when you do your own credit work, you can actually discover that a lot of these municipalities that are suffering as a result of the defaults that we've seen in Stockton and other places has caused the premium, the risk premium on municipal debt to increase. And the other thing is that the natural buyer for municipal bonds, the retail investor, has become so shell-shocked as a result that there isn't much of an incremental buyer base. So I think that this is a serious issue at the state and local level. And as you know, I was heavily involved in the Build America bond campaign. I think that
you might just describe that to the audience.
Sure.
Scott was the leader in this area in the United States.
Right. Yeah, basically what the U.S. government did was say that there is a tax revenue loss as a result of people buying tax-exempt bonds. So rather than giving the tax benefit to the investor, why not have the government take what would have been the revenue loss and subsidize the coupon on the municipal debt so that the taxable bond buyer would have more of an interest? And when you look at the investor base for tax-exempt debt, it's very narrow. It's usually mostly just individuals and property and casualty companies. Of course, the buyer for taxable debt is much larger, pension funds, endowments, other insurance companies. And so by taking the tax benefit away from the bondholder and using it as a subsidy to increase the coupon by the part of the government, broadened the investor base and actually brought down the net borrowing cost to the municipality. So the Build America program was a great way during the financial crisis to help municipalities to borrow money for infrastructure and investments. And if you've driven along the 405, you'll see the sign that says that this was a Build America project. So even the money that's being used to rebuild California infrastructure came from that program. And I think a similar program today would go a long way to helping unfreeze the municipal market.
And what would you say today the average price of a Build America bond would be?
Today, that would probably be somewhere between 30 and 40% higher than the price that was issued at the time.
Okay, so it proved to be a very successful investment and drove infrastructure investing. Let's switch, if I could, for a moment. We have one of our panelists who was not born in the United States, Lyndon, Rive, and you might have read in a lot about him in his background, but Lyndon, one of the things that I was most intrigued by was not that you were born in South Africa, but that you were a member of the U.S. national underwater hockey team. Now,
Underwater.
not everyone here in the city where we've had strong hockey teams and have won a cup not too long ago knows what underwater hockey is. So before they hear you, I wanted to show a brief video so everyone could see, be on an even plane here of what the U.S. national underwater hockey team looks like. If we could just roll that short video. Now,
Very impressive.
how did you get into that sport? Besides for the fact I noticed that video was co-ed, I could understand.
That, just in all defense, that's like the most rookie video out there. When somebody has long pants playing underwater hockey, you know he's not a advanced hockey player. But actually, it's actually a really interesting story. Not that I want to take this whole group down the road of underwater hockey, but back to immigration. So I came to the U.S. in '98 to actually represent South Africa at the World Championships of Underwater Hockey in San Jose, California. Liked it so much, went back to South Africa, sold my business, and then moved back here. And I started my first business at the age of 17, so I never got a university degree, never went to university. And so when you come to the U.S. without a degree, it's really, really hard to get into the U.S. It's even hard to get into the U.S. with a degree, never mind one without a degree. I started a software company with my brother. And then when you start a company, you can get an E2 visa. But as soon as you lose 50% of the ownership, you lose that visa. So that time I was employing 280 people and couldn't get a U.S. visa. I had 4 lawyers working on it, and eventually it was, sorry, that's it, you got to leave. Wow, there's got to be a better way. And then my wife actually figured this out. There's a category called exceptional ability. And this is how professional athletes get into the country. This is how professional actors get into the country. And both my wife and I play for the U.S. team of underwater hockey. And so we got our green card through exceptional ability of underwater hockey. And so I was able to stay in the country. Now I employ over 4,000 people. So
Lyndon, let me just show the group. When we talk about California, just the importance of immigration to the state of California. And California, for most of the years, has net migration into other states. And we've had this dramatic changing face over the last 12 years with almost a 40% increase in people of Asian ancestry, almost a 33% increase in people from Latin America, and actually a decrease of almost 6% of people from European. These are actual percentages. And so today, California is approaching the day when the #1 ethnic group in our state will be of Latin American ancestry. It's just a little bit below European today. And today, the majority of people in the state are of Asian and Latin American ancestry. So we've had this dramatic change, and Lyndon, we're very happy you came here. One of the other things the group might not know is that I think your mom is the twin sister of Elon Musk.
Correct.
Right? So we were very excited to see this entrepreneurism run in the family here, passed on to subsequent generations. Let's talk for a moment of how you went from your first businesses to how you got in the solar business.
Yes. So after running a enterprise software business, we manage PCs remotely. My brother and I are extremely passionate about some of the environmental challenges that we face. And when you come to learn 3 nasty facts that we all know, but we kind of forget about it. So nasty fact number 1, the largest air polluter in the country is the utility industry. Nasty fact number 2, the largest water polluter in the country is the utility industry. Nasty fact number 3, the second largest consumer of water is the utility industry. In fact, the average household uses more water in the creation of the electricity than water consumption itself. Just wrap your head around that. So then you sit down and you go, we should do something about that. We should change that. And so then on the idea was a discussion with myself and Elon, and we looked at the industry and thought getting into the solar industry can help scale and change the way energy is delivered. And that's why we started SolarCity, and not installing solar equipment. I think that model can only apply to a certain amount of people, but actually just selling the electricity. And so that's what we want to do, is transform the way energy is delivered.
So, Bobby, let's go to you. You came from Michigan. Let's start going back a little bit in time, and you eventually found your way to California. Why'd you come to California?
Well, at the University of Michigan, where I founded my first software company, we came to realize that the software industry, unlike what we expected, was actually all centered in California. I think it's an important point, and very apropos of the panel discussion today, that I will never forget the experiences that I had in Detroit and how important it is not to repeat the mistakes that Detroit made. And there are so many things that you see happening in California today that remind me of the mistakes that happened right after the auto industry was at its greatest success. And so Detroit is a constant reminder for us that we need to be paranoid about our successes and not take for granted the unique resources, capabilities, and advantages that we have in the state of California. It's funny, you following in the footsteps of someone who followed in his own footsteps, and listening to the governor speak, you realize that the surplus, if you think about it, from a 5-year period of time of $4 billion, given where we were in 2009, where we are today, $4 billion is an inconsequential amount of money to consider as a surplus. It has no useful value for most anything when you think about what the state's budget is and what the state is likely to spend over the next 5 years. But I think that's one of the challenges you realize, is that we really are constrained as a state in the resources that we have, and a lot of the kinds of things that you need to put in place that are going to have long-term positive impact on allowing us to maintain the innovation advantages that we have, things like education. And the changes that have taken place in the country since the auto industry was so unsuccessful, you think about now the new competitors that didn't exist at that time. But we look at, Detroit was supplanted by California. China didn't have the embrace of capitalism that it does today. You look at Eastern Europe, it didn't have the embrace of free markets and capitalism that it does today. And so I think when you think of Austin or Boston or some of these other places that are in the US that we view as competitors to California, the real competitors to California are not even in the United States anymore.
Bobby, if you looked at California today, from where you sit versus when you first came here, how have you changed as California's changed?
It's a great question, and in fact, you figure into that answer. My really first visit to California in 1983 was to come visit you. I don't know if you remember this, but I had an appointment with you. Steve Wynn had arranged it. He was my first investor, and I was expecting to see you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I told Steve I was going to see you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he said, "You must be visiting Mike at the house." And I said, "No, I'm going to his office on Wilshire Boulevard." And Steve said, "No, that you must mean 3 in the morning." I said, "No one meets at 3 o'clock in the morning." And so of course, our meeting was at 3 o'clock in the morning. And there were 300 people in the office and 6 people offering breakfast. But I remember the first meeting we had, you asked me about the future cash flows of the business that we were in. And I was a history of art major, making software for an Apple II, and I had no idea what you were even asking. So I went back and asked my best friend from growing up, Eddie Lampert, to tutor me on finance. So for my next meeting, I would come back and be able to be reasonably informed. And of course, 3 or 4 months later, when I came back to visit you, I still had no idea what I was talking about or what you were asking. So I'd say the single biggest difference from my first visit to California to today is I could read financial statements now. Still, most of the conversations we have, I have no idea what you're asking.
Well, Bobby, I do think you're symbolic of everyone on the panel today in California. And our title of our session is Invest in California. And that you're a true entrepreneur and, you know, obviously entered into one of the larger transactions this year in the repurchase of Vivendi's stake in your company. Okay, maybe why do you have so much confidence in the future for you and your company and California with the decision to essentially buy them out of their majority stake in the company?
Well, so, and this is independent of California, but I'm in a very unique business where, you know, it's a $50 billion worldwide industry today, and you look at other forms of entertainment like narrative content, film and television, or you look at gambling and wagering. You know, film and television is a $500 billion worldwide industry. Gambling and wagering are, you know, it's probably $1 trillion worldwide industry, and we're a $50 billion industry that has a lot of the characteristics and attributes of those businesses. So when you look out around the world at how many more devices will have a microprocessor connected to a display that will enable you to have an interactive entertainment experience, I think our industry is one that has almost unlimited growth.
We'll get back to that in a minute. Lynda, 22,500 square mile area called the Central Valley. It's one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world. I remember driving to it many years ago, as I used to drive to Berkeley at that time. And it's home to one of California's key industries. Yet, when you speak, you often talk about the challenge you're facing in finding better educated, training workforces, the quality of life for your employees, etc. What are you doing to address this challenge?
You don't want to know where I was born and where I came from?
Yes, we do.
And how I've changed in the last 12
Well,
years?
why don't you start there? Why don't you start there?
I'm only teasing.
Where were you born, Lynn?
I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and I came to Los Angeles when I was 16 years old because my father's in the motion picture industry, and my daddy's going to be 95 on Thanksgiving. Yeah, George Burns used to say, just by standing up, he could get applause. Yes, and so Daddy made The Blob, and that's what brought us to Los Angeles. And yeah, and so I also did not finish college. I went to work when I was 19 as an entrepreneur in an advertising and a marketing agency that I founded when I was 19 years old. But I still work with my husband, Stuart. We have Fiji water and Palm Wonderful and little clementines that used to be called cuties and now called halos and wonderful pistachios. So Jerry...
Let's not forget the almonds also.
And the almonds, right. Jerry Brown doesn't have any fears of us ever taking our business out of California. We have 20 million trees in the San Joaquin Valley, and we have 3,000 employees there. And they live with the worst air, the highest teen pregnancy, the worst, not the worst education system, but a very challenged education system. We hire about 500 or 600 middle management people a year at our businesses, and we can't find them in the Valley. There's a slide that you told me about.
Slide 18, let's
Yeah.
bring that one up.
Just to show you how poorly California does in education. We don't fail people in our state. We just move them along. And these children, and Frank's agreeing with me because he knows better than anybody what the problems are in California. So when we hire a middle management person for $40,000 or $50,000 a year, we have to put them through 3 months of rigorous training before they hit the factory floor, which is an enormous expense, and it's also a challenge because if they're not a worthy employee by the time they come, you've really got a problem. I started rebuilding towns in the Central Valley, and I realized very shortly, we've only been involved in this philanthropy in the Valley for about 3.5 years. We've been writing a lot of checks throughout our history for museums and worthy charities, and the Sustainability Institute at Caltech and UCLA and so forth. But I wasn't really involved in the issues. I wanted to work with people. I wanted to get fulfilled myself on that level. And I didn't have to look far. 145 miles away to the Central Valley is where this great need is. And so I realized that all the work that we're doing, rebuilding cities and so forth, is not sustainable without education. So we started to get involved in education. Today we influence 50 schools. We give school grants anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000. You can all do that to your local school. You'd be surprised. You can buy a microscope. You can buy iPads. You can buy software. It's a small investment, and it makes such an enormous difference. LA Unified is really struggling terribly, and we also do a lot for LA Unified. But the Valley is really where we are putting most of our efforts today. We have a preschool, we have a 6 through 12 high school. But the big idea I think that we're doing that I would hope that others would be inspired by today is what we call career tech. Starting in September, 4 high schools and 3 community colleges are joining with us to create a curriculum where a child will identify themselves in the between 8th and 9th grade that they might want a career in agriculture. You know, ag isn't picking fruit anymore. It is technicians, computer scientists, it is learning about water, it is it's marketing, it's pest management, all kinds of things, welding and so forth. We'll send them to a summer camp. We had 6 camps this summer. We'll have 12 next summer, where they can see all the different disciplines involved in farming and agriculture. And then they start in the 9th grade. They start getting college courses immediately in the 9th grade. By the time they graduate, they have an AA degree. They've been interning at our companies. They've been shadowing executives. And when they graduate, they will have an AA degree under their belt, and they can decide, do they want to come to work for us, $40,000 or $50,000 a year, or another ag company, we don't care, or would they like to go on to a 4-year school? They've gotten that AA degree free. And it's very exciting, and Darrell Steinberg's doing great things also with this very same idea. And so there's money available if you can start a coalition with local high schools and community colleges.
I think Lynda's underlined a very important issue here that many people in this audience know, that it's one thing to write checks, and a lot of people support many causes. It's another thing to take your ability and get personally involved in that activity and get a leverage by what you know and your skills and your knowledge from that standpoint. Lyndon, let's go back to yourself. Many of the discussions on the solar industry have related to, and I distributed this thing from the journal, does it exist because of subsidies? Can it be competitive with other sources of energy? Obviously, this is an area that you've spoken on a lot in the company. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, yes, it is true that today there is a tax credit for solar, but all energy sources have been highly subsidized. Solar, however, has done a fantastic job of bringing down its cost. If you just look at California, which is the U.S.'s largest solar state, it started off with $2.50 a watt rebate, and now there are essentially no more state rebates for solar. And adoption has never been higher. But there's still there's still a big movement that we can have in reducing the cost even further. Now, one of the big costs associated with solar is soft cost. What I mean by that is all the permitting challenges and stuff to get the solar system installed. If I can have slide 22 come up. So this is actually from the building code, just from the building code. And I thought I'd just like give a perception, give the group here an idea of what we're up against. Because can solar survive without incentives? But then the fossil fuel industry doesn't have any incentives. Here's a classic example of a hidden incentive. So this is what work can you do in your house or on your property that does not require a permit, First one, buying a little tool shed or a little garage or playhouse at the back of your house, wrecking that up, going to Home Depot, you shouldn't need a permit for that. I get that one. Building a small little fence, less than 7 feet, you shouldn't need a permit for that either. I totally get that. A retaining wall of not over 4 feet, I totally get that. I mean, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Then an oil derrick. Oil derrick. Okay, then he goes, so this is not fake. This is in California, right there. You know what? That system did not require a permit.
I'm getting rid of my tennis court.
So my point is, I actually have no criticism on the no permit for oil derrick. I think that's fantastic. I just want the same thing to apply to the solar industry. Let's reduce the friction. Let's figure out ways how we can reduce the cost. The technology cost is coming down nicely. We're doing a fantastic job. We have 3.5 years left, or actually probably 3 years left, of the federal tax credit at 30%. Cost is coming down. It's going to go from 30% down to 10%. And based on what we see, our cost curve reduction, combined with the cost of retail energy going up, and our cost of financing coming down, that it's going to be an extremely viable market. But to get the cost further down, to make it affordable to more homeowners, we've got to take out all the little soft costs, and permitting is one of them.
I think one of the things that Lyndon points out here, and I really want to stress it, is we don't really fully cost items. And so when we talked about what was the cost of a gallon of gasoline, what you're paying, and we've done estimates and others, Joel Kurtzman of the Institute, and somewhere between $12 to $14 a gallon. Now, you're not paying $12 to $14 a gallon because they haven't factored in the cost of the aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf or all the military, et cetera. And the U.S. has spent $8 trillion in the Persian Gulf since 1976. Also, we haven't tagged pollution, air pollution from coal and all these other items, that someday the market will actually put a cost on what are the environmental effects of these issues. And so I think, in a way, Lyndon, you've addressed the solar, but we haven't fully cost the other elements, the full circle. The other area that what Lyndon talked about, I just want to follow up here for a moment on, is water. If you look at water, it's a very interesting thing, and in California, water is precious. You know, we have Northern California periodically that feels that Southern California, with the majority of the population, shouldn't get their water. But luckily, we have a good treaty. Lynda and Stewart have one of the largest aquifers in the world, so this isn't an issue. But when you look at how...
It's expensive to get it out.
It is. It's even more expensive when you can't get it, though, right?
Much more.
And so, but I think when you see here that agriculture in developing countries, Asia, Africa, Middle East, 80% or so of their water uses is for agriculture. And just see what we've been able to do here in the United States today and in Europe, where agriculture, which is far more productive, we're using far less water. So the water issue is an important element for all of us to deal with. And so the full costing of the full cycle, whether it's pollution, whether air issues, et cetera, when it's taken into effect, you have these dramatic changes. And obviously in nuclear, the challenge has been the nuclear waste? What is the full cost of eliminating that nuclear waste? Scott, I'd like to go to another issue if I could
Mike,
with
just
you.
one question
Sure,
on that,
go
because I
ahead,
just
man.
want to give a story here that people may appreciate. I'm not sure if anyone's been tracking the Arizona debate with solar and the utilities. Big debate. We won, by the way. That was a close call. But I was having a debate with one of the executives from the utilities, and we were talking about the subsidy issue. And he was saying, of course, solar is highly subsidized and the utility industry is not. And we talked about nuclear, and then we also talked about water. And I said, well, you get your water at a massive discount. That's a subsidy. And he's like, no, that's not a subsidy. That's the price we've always paid for it.
Scott, I wanted to turn. When you make a decision to invest in a company, anyone up here, or you make a decision to go someplace, one of the areas you always wonder is, what are the liabilities of the past? What are the issues that people are facing from the past? Are you starting at the starting line, or are you starting behind the starting line, or in front of the starting line? And obviously, we see these very large, unfunded, potentially unfunded pension funds here. And in many cases, the issues surrounding these municipal bankruptcies are their payments they need to make. How do you, from the investment standpoint, and how do you, from being a California resident headquartered here, Scott, view the large unfunded pensions in the state?
Well, Mike, the unfunded
And when Bobby talks about a $4 billion surplus not being a major item on an economy that's $2 trillion, okay, obviously you can have dramatic changes and unfunded pensions of 100 to 200 billion.
Right.
How do you view that?
Well, and when you look at slide 90, I think this puts it in perspective when we see what the probability of a shortfall is and how large the shortfall is in the state's pension fund. But Mike, you obviously have to make this part of your investment analysis. But I think the thing that's probably even more disturbing than the unfunded pension liabilities, and some of the cities around the state have some very, very large unfunded pension liabilities. San Diego is one. It's not just the unfunded pension liability, but it's the category of what is referred to as other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. And the interesting thing is, if you're a corporation and you promise to pay health care to your employees, after they retire, that has to be accrued onto your balance sheet and disclosed. In the case of other post-employment benefits, which will probably outstrip pension benefits, most of the cities and municipalities in the state have large post-employment benefits which are not recorded on their income statements. And so, for instance, if you're a city fireman or a policeman and you retire after 20 or 30 years of service, in many cases you're promised lifetime medical care. So, these liabilities that are piling up at the state, really at the local level, I think are more significant than the liabilities that we have at the state level. And it's interesting that we've seen places like Stockton, we've seen places like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, places which are not state level problems, but are local municipal problems. I think those are going to proliferate over the coming years. And as an investor, that's why we spend a lot of time getting to know each municipality that we deal with. But I think it's a very difficult thing for individuals to have the skill to evaluate. That's the plug, by the way, to invest in Guggenheim mutual funds or hire us. But I think that this problem is something we're going to work our way through for the next 20 years. I recently had some meetings with the city of Jacksonville, Florida. They have a problem with their pension fund. What they talked to me about was the possibility of privatizing their ports and other city-owned facilities and actually taking the privatized assets and contributing it to the pension fund as a way to cover the deficit. So I think there will be a lot of innovative solutions. that will be done. And the other interesting thing is when we look to state government and we look to federal government for leadership, I think the real leadership for America is going to be at the state and local level. The solutions to the big problems are going to happen at the local level and eventually be embraced at the higher level. And that is, I think, the opportunity for innovation.
Obviously, one of the issues, Scott, you've just spoken about was on the front page of the paper today, where the local union in Washington, the Boeing employees, voted not to take the offer that Boeing had made that was supported by the national union. And that offer was $10,000 up front, but essentially to turn their pensions and things into 401k plans. And they voted it down, which potentially, and the state had offered, I think, $8 billion in tax over a long period of time, and they had guaranteed employment for 20 years. But the not willing to accept a change in pension or other benefits by the employees essentially potentially has jeopardized the jobs in state of Washington versus some other state. And I think when you look at California, as we think about it as a growth area, the union membership today, outside between 2011 and 12, there were 500,000 union jobs that were lost, less union membership in the United States. But there was an increase in California of almost 100,000. And so one of the discussions is the relative areas. And Bobby, I know we've talked about Albany and Madison and other parts of the country. You are competing with Google, Facebook, and many people for employees with technology skills today. How do you see that competition in terms of compensation, taxes in the U.S. versus other states or other countries, and versus other companies?
You know, it's no secret, it is increasingly difficult to attract and retain the most qualified, capable designers, engineers, programmers to California. And it comes down to very simple things like quality of life, the ability to get access to a good quality public education, affordable housing, the ability to be able to have a reasonable commute. And there's nothing that we see that is improving any of those things in the state of California right now. And you look at the CalPERS, the likely underfunded pension obligations, and you think about $4 billion surplus. The governor would have to be in office for 100 years, and he looks good. I mean, but
That's not going to happen.
the idea that we're going to have a $4 billion surplus and somehow that's going to allow us to become more competitive and overcome a lot of these challenges, what we're finding now is we're having a much easier time taking California employees, moving them to Austin, Texas, to Madison, Wisconsin, to Albany, New York. We've had a much greater increase in our engineering headcount in our studios in Shanghai than all of our studios combined in California in the last 2 years. So I worry that, when you look at this slide, it's a perfect slide. Intel's employment growth has largely come outside of the state of California. It is becoming increasingly difficult to attract and retain the very best, most qualified people. The thing that I think we're the most concerned about, though, is if you look at the state of public education in California, and you look at how the $62 billion in K-12 education was spent relative to what you actually got in a result, the population of educated, capable employees in this state is declining at a rate that is going to make it, statistically impossible for us to attract and retain the most quality employees.
I think one of the things we see for California, though, is a desire to come here from the rest of the world if they could get in. And so the majority of patents, as the governor pointed out, are issued to people who were not born in the United States. More than 50% of all the engineers and scientists in Silicon Valley were not born in the United States. And this dramatic change. So whereas there's been migration out of California to the other states, as you've outlined, Bobby, with jobs, still California has a large appeal to people from around the world. And so when you look at the population changes, you have immigration. Lynda, your passion for and deciding that it's education that defines everything.
Oh, hardly
if we,
everything.
no, I'm
A
saying
lot.
in terms of your workforce to start,
Right.
what could you tell us? We all know about frustrations we've had. Could you tell us any success stories that you've had that you would share with us, or lessons learned that you would do differently today as it relates to the education area?
I don't understand the question. I feel like Bobby when he was 13 years old at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Is there anything that surprised you when you
Well-
started to the upside? There's obviously a lot of downside
Yes,
surprises.
because I started doing focus groups at LAUSD with 11th and 12th graders. I interviewed 150 students in depth for 2.5 hours to hear from the students' point of view. And I walked away. First of all, I came home crying every night, and Stuart said, "You've got to stop this." Or writing checks to the children, or doing whatever I could to help them. I mean, really, it was, you're talking about children with classrooms of 50 kids in a classroom. They don't understand last in, first out. They don't understand why their best teachers are being fired. They don't understand why we only reimburse, what is it, $7,000 a year per child, and New York is $16,000, Boston is $15,000, Massachusetts. I mean, we're at the very bottom, 47th in the United States. What I found that's different in the Central Valley from Los Angeles is that there's a family structure. There's a mother and a father who really care about their children's future, and once engaged, they become much more active in their children's education. So we give classes to really hundreds and hundreds of parents throughout the Central Valley, a 9-week course called PK. And when they graduate, they really are totally involved in the future of that child and become advocates at the school. We also start with preschool, with mothers and their children before they go to kindergarten, to get them ready for school so that they can do a better job when they get there.
I just put up the chart here. I think one of the reasons Lynda has focused particularly on this preschool, it gives you the highest rate of return on education. And we've talked about this for a long time, but $1 invested in a 5-year-old requires $5 in a 22-year-old to get the same results. Yet.
If they don't go to preschool and they don't go to summer school, they're 5 years behind in graduation. 5 years. It's unbelievable, the difference. That's why summer school is so imperative to us. That's why we'll do 12 this year and 24 next year. I'm going to cover the Valley with summer school, because the children forget, between leaving and then going back in September. But there's one other thing that we just started doing that I want to share, and it has to do with healthcare. We're giving a free healthcare to all of our employees in the Central Valley. It's one thing for them to have a great healthcare policy, but if it takes a whole day in rural America to get to see a doctor, and then by the time you're finished at that clinic, the pharmacy's closed, and it takes another day to go drive and get your drugs. What we're doing now is we have mini hospitals right at our plants. So we're serving 8,000 people now in the Valley, and it is we give them free, baseline drugs. Every test is free, and we triage for more, earth-shattering diseases. We've saved so many lives already, and it's only been open like 6 months. And now what we're thinking of doing is also opening up in Los Angeles, in our company here, of having a doctor on staff and healthcare professionals. And because prevention is everything, Mike, this is what Mike lives and breathes. If you can bring your staff to wellness, they won't have these enormous health bills. I mean, my God, what we pay in healthcare is just off the charts, tens of millions of dollars a year. So that's something else, I think, for businesses to consider. If you have a lot of employees, it really pays.
So we have a panel here. We're going to switch the tone now for a little while. None of our 4 panelists were born in the state of California. So now we want to hear them pitch the state of California. We've heard a lot about some challenges now. Now it's time for a little pitching.
Well, I was conceived in the state of California.
Is that your pitch, Bobby?
So, Bobby, you're now recruiting employees to come to the state of California, and you know, we have a tremendous success here in California. Obviously, it's the center of entrepreneurism. One out of every 3 of the top 12 bioscience universities in the world are here in California. So, Bobby, I'm a potential employee. Convinced me that I ought to be going down to Irvine to work for you, or what are you telling those employees?
Well, you start out, California is still the center of innovation for the world. And so if you want to have a career in technology or something that is a growth business where you can have legitimate wealth creation, a lot of opportunity for career development and advancement, there's probably no greater place than the state of California today.
2 of the top 3 companies with the largest market cap in the world are obviously here in California, and Apple and Google, among many other large companies.
I would say that's something that it's still uniquely a unique opportunity to California to be able to have all of the centers of innovation here. I think from a higher education perspective, both the public universities and the private universities in California are among the best in the world. I think with some immigration reform, we actually might be able to retain the people who are coming from other countries to the state of California. But I think it is a great selling feature to attract people to California that you have the best higher education probably of any place in the world. I think when you look at quality of life, other than the fact you have long commutes, difficult to get access to good quality public K through 12 education, you still have one of the most beautiful places in the world where you're within 2 hours of every type of sport or leisure time. Now, we don't encourage leisure time at our own company. And we're generally in the business of promoting a sedentary lifestyle. But if you did choose to have an active lifestyle, it's a very good place to do it.
It's hard to beat the beauty of California. And I've mentioned to many of you over the years that a retiring chief economist of Bank of America, and there's a look at Lake Tahoe, that's not bad. After 30 years, his number 1 determinant on how many people would move to California was the weather at the Rose Bowl versus other parts of the country. So what it was in Toledo and seeing those people in their T-shirts at the Rose Bowl definitely drove him here. So, Bobby,
I hadn't thought about underwater sports as an attraction, but as a longtime Laker season ticket holder, underwater sports is something that we're very familiar with.
Low blows.
It is still easy to attract talented people. I think that California still is a place that has allure to most people for a whole host of reasons. I think if you think about Hollywood, the idea of having overnight successes and, being able to be a land that does fulfill your dreams, I think, as Hollywood was when Lynda's father produced The Blob, or if you think about Twitter, or Facebook, $26 billion of market cap from the ether, or, hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap, from 2 guys in their dorm rooms, you still have unique opportunities in California that you do not have anywhere else in the world.
Scott?
Well, Mike, I feel like you kind of set the panel up because we all have something in common up here, which is we all started businesses. And we're all here in California. But if you just put up slide 16, if I were selling the state, especially to a young person, I would say this is the state of opportunity. This economy is so dynamic. It is so open to innovation. There are so many resources available. And you can see it in the data, that entrepreneurial success is greater in California than anywhere else. And the reason has to be something that really is in the DNA of the state. This place was built on a gold rush, and I think there's a little bit of that mentality even today, that California is the place where you can go and you can try any new idea and see if you can become successful. And if you were very fortunate, you contacted Mike Milken in the 1980s, and he helped you get your business going.
Let's go to you, Lynn. You've come from South Africa. Compare and contrast California for you with South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, California is just the best place in the world, frankly. There is no other place where a 22-year-old can leave a country without a degree, come here, raise $2 million from Draperfish and Jefferson, by the way. They invested in us ever since. Start a business, hire 200 people, then start another business and hire 4,000 people. You just can't do that in other countries. It's just too hard. I mean, you get stuck in a certain stigma, and you have to do it this way. California embraces change. It's up for trying new things. California is leading in changing the way energy is delivered. That's a new thing. It's changing technology. It's changing so many different things. Transportation. You just don't get that in any other parts of the world. You maybe get a glimpse of it, but not to the level of what we see here in California. And then just our business itself, we have over 2,000 people just in California, but we're fortunate enough that we don't face much of the driving issues. We have such a distributed infrastructure, and it's helped the housing crash and the construction industry crash has actually helped us, because that's exactly the type of people we hire. And it has been great. The people come to work, they love what they're doing because they're doing something that has an environmental impact, and then also they make money. And so we're very happy about California.
I think I want to follow up on that point, Lyndon, for a moment. When I think over the last 40 years of people I've interacted with that have really built successful businesses as entrepreneurs, very few of them, their first objective was to make money. They had passion for what they were doing. And you motivated your employees to what you're doing had value for society. Wealth and all the success was a byproduct. And obviously, Google's paraphrase, "do no evil," at the beginning, symbolized their view on that standpoint. And I think this is an element that California does symbolize the American dream. Okay, Lynda, you're now recruiting us to come to work in California from around the world or other parts of the United States. What's your pitch?
Well, I think if Stuart were here today, he would tell you that I don't think that either Stuart or myself would ever have been as successful anyplace else. I mean, by the time Stuart graduated from law school, he had 500 janitors working for him. We say he went from mop to mogul because that's the way he started, worked his way all the way through college. And of course, we can't move anywhere else. We have 200 square miles of tree crops in the San Joaquin Valley. But I love the spirit of California. I love the people here. We're unique. I love dealing with the Latino culture that I deal with every day. It renews my faith in humanity. And of course, in our corporate offices in Los Angeles, you know, we have gyms, we have, you know, all kinds of wellness classes. People take yoga. You know, where do you see that sort of thing? It's really part of the spirit of living here and being able to be outside, get the fresh air. You know, the climate's divine. But it's really the entrepreneurial spirit, as everyone else has said. I don't know what I can add to that, but at 19, without a college education, to open my own advertising agency and to do as well as I did is kind of unbelievable. And I never doubted myself, which I should have. Looking back, I don't know what I was thinking, but it worked out. And I think it worked out mainly because I was here in California to an open society. So I love it here.
And I think when we talk about all the challenges, it's also the opportunity. I remember when I finally made the decision to move back to California because my father was passing away from cancer. I went back to my home in New Jersey. This was an ice storm, and the pipes had frozen in my house, and it kind of, I was only 82 degrees in Los Angeles, and I flew back to Philadelphia. And so the next morning, I didn't have, of course, any snow tires on my car. And leaving at 4 in the morning with our bedroom right over the garage, I knew I had to cut the wheel because I couldn't turn around and leave. So I cut the wheel on the car and it hit one side of the garage and caused a lot of damage. My Lori runs down it and tells me, am I crazy going to work? So I said, no, I'm not going to go to work. So she went back to bed. I told her I'm going to work in the office in my house, and waited about 20 minutes till she fell asleep. I took the other car out. Okay, and I went to the other side of the garage and hit the other side of the garage that day. And 6 hours later, I arrived. I decided to work in Philadelphia instead of New York. But we sometimes forget. When I think of all the families that grew up and the kids could play in the backyard and the advantages you have, just what California brings. But I think what you heard from these 4 panelists today was California stands for the American dream to the rest of the world. A chance to succeed, not based on where you went to school, not who your parents were, not what your race was, not what your religion was, but based on your ability. And there is no more place in the world that embraces venture capital and entrepreneurism. But almost 70% of everything that happens in California, good and bad. So in closing, as Lynda said, we've spent a lot of time on nutrition. We hoped you liked our non-fried fried chicken today, which we gave you today. But here's a picture of the California County Fair with the new foods that California is introducing. In closing, the chocolate-covered bacon is still coming to you. The deep-fried butter, it's just hard to eat that just quarter of a pound of butter straight out of the refrigerator. So, and as I mentioned to our group today, the one that really I look forward to is the garlic butter bacon fries cooked in bacon grease. So when you have your bacon grease and you're done cooking your bacon, save it, because these will be the new fries. Now, we talked about a lot of movement to Austin and other places today. So our secret Milken Institute team went to the Texas Fair. What are they doing in Texas relative to California? So here, between September 27th and October 20th, were the new foods being introduced at the Texas State Fair. Golden fried millionaire pie, so you just don't eat pie. We might serve you here, but they'd fry it. Okay, and so I want to show you just a short video, secret video we were able to take of the winner at this year's Texas State Fair.
Well, we talk about it and think about it all year, getting ready for the competition, all kinds of crazy ideas.
It's got ooey gooey goodness inside of it.
This is tomato cheese, pickles, cayenne pepper, and bacon.
Well, it's fried Thanksgiving dinner. It's everything that you would have in a Thanksgiving dinner in a deep fried ball.
Deep fried Nutella.
The Texas fried fireball. Deep fried Cuban roll.
And this is our love letter to the State Fair of Texas. State Fair of Texas, to Big Tech, to the state of Texas.
So the top 20 finalists were all fried, including fried ice cream that you saw there. That's fried banana split. But the winner, in case you were interested in this year, was the person that was able to deep fry an entire Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, that was the new dish today. So we have a lot of work to do in the nutrition area that we're bringing. But I want to thank all the panelists today, and I would hope each of them is so unique in what they've done as an entrepreneur. And Bobby, I remember when Bobby was 40, I called and told him, Bobby, you've been a CEO for more than half your life by the time you hit 40. And he might be, by the time he's 90, the longest living CEO from that standpoint. Lynda?
I remember, Mike, when you made that call, hanging up, and it's, I think, very apropos of the discussion today, and something that we didn't really acknowledge. But if you think about one of the great advantages that California has today, it's something that really was pioneered by you, which is in the 1980s when Steve Ross or Bill McGowan or people who were the pioneers of innovation in technology and entertainment were unable to get financing. Mike was the person who innovated financing for entrepreneurs, And it was that tradition and his unique skills and capabilities that enable entrepreneurs to realize their dreams in California today. So I think that's really something we should all acknowledge, and I know I'm personally very grateful.
Thank you, Bob. But the exciting thing about California is 20 years from now, a young man from South Africa will come here with a new idea. A young girl born in Baltimore will come here with the idea she can form her own advertising agency. A young guy from Pennsylvania will come here and think he can manage a couple $100 billion looking at the Pacific Ocean. And a young kid will drop out of college in Michigan and think he can build the world's greatest interactive company, Activision. So thank you all for joining us today.